Welcome to Kindness in Business, the podcast where we explore the power of compassion and empathy in the business world. My name is Sonia Gonzalez-Guillonneau, and I'll be your host. Today we have a very special guest. We have John Richardson with us. John is the co-founder and director of coaching at MySalesCoach, a platform built to close the sales performance gap by combining expert coaching with powerful technology. With over 11 years in sales development and a deep understanding of what drives high-performing teams, John previously founded EXP, a company focused on helping businesses find the right SDRs and sales talent. Today, he's on a mission to equip salespeople with the coaching and support they need to thrive. Welcome, John. Very happy to have you here today.
Thank you. It's really amazing to be here and really excited for this conversation.
I'm very excited too, so I guess we'll go right into it. My first question is, who are you beyond work?
Yeah, so a great question and not one that's asked enough. So I'm a husband, a father. I've got two little girls who are 7 years old and 5 years old. And I am a diabetic, which takes up a lot of your life. I'm a cancer survivor from the last couple of years. And I love spending time with family, playing games, and just hanging out with friends and people that are important to me.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing as well some of the vulnerable years, right? And some of the things that have happened. I know that the last few years have been challenging for you, and I think challenging is an understatement, right? And with downtimes and with challenges, kindness plays a very key role, right? And I think you're the perfect person to come on today because from the first time we met, you came across as a very genuine, very kind, and a very caring person, right? And I think what you put out there comes back as well. And you received a lot of that kindness and support back throughout the years, right? So we'll dive a little bit into that. But first of all, I guess if you want to tell a little bit about what does kindness in business mean to you personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think it comes back to your first question around who are you outside of work. I think kindness in business is about dealing with the people as people rather than as numbers. And that doesn't mean that you can't make difficult decisions and that you can't do difficult things and things that might make people not happy. You can't make decisions just to make everybody happy all the time. But I think, the people that you work with, you spend more time with than anybody else, whether that's the customers, colleagues, co-workers, whoever that is. And so I think dealing with them as people is definitely kind of top of that list. So whether that's caring about them as an individual by asking questions about who they are outside of work and beyond what they do, whether that's about recognizing that work is a part of people's lives and not everything about their lives. And so, giving them the space and time they need to deal with personal challenges, but also personal excitement and, great things that happen to people in their lives. But I think as part of that, it's also about being fair with people. And that means telling them the truth, being honest in what you do. It's not kind to not tell people what the truth is or what you really think as well, right? So if you think something's not a good idea, it's not kind to let them think you think it is one. But that doesn't mean that you should destroy ideas that you think are not good ideas, right? You've got to communicate in a way that helps people to grow and develop. And I think the biggest one is trying to leave everybody that you interact with better off as a result of that interaction, rather than just thinking about what's in it for you, right? How do you always give something to people, even if all that is just that you're a nice person to speak to and that you're an enjoyable person to speak to. It's about always wanting to leave every person better as a result of having interacted with you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it comes down to sales as well, right? If you're putting your prospects' needs first, you're going to have much more successful conversations than if you're putting yourself as the seller first. And I think in life in general, people have become very guarded. They look after themselves, they look after their family and their own. But actually, the more we help others out, the more they help others out, the more we all are better off, right? And obviously, you've been leading teams, you've been an SDR yourself, you've been in the trenches and you've done all of the different sales roles. And now you're working with coaches and matching them to coachees as well. And you're at the end of it all with all of those roles, talking to people, to individuals, right? So it really comes down to the same thing. And I think people don't understand that element, right? Alone, you can only go so far. Together, we can go much further. And there's definitely a quote around that I've butchered right there. But I think is something that is very important. And I guess if you could share a little bit about a time where compassion or empathy led to a breakthrough for you or your team, or even supported you through some of those challenging times.
Yeah, I think there's probably two stories I'll share. One is where I've received that kindness, and one where maybe I was able to help somebody by being kind. I had someone in my team when I was running an SDR team at New Voice Media who I had hired. She'd been in kind of vehicle sales previously, so she'd been working in a car dealership. Part of what she'd done had been on the phone, but most of it really was in person. And she was a delight, a real like bubbly personality, really good with people. But the truth is that what she enjoyed about sales was just being with people, not necessarily selling to them. And we'd hired her. She'd done reasonably well, but kind of started to become a little bit negative at work. And I hadn't quite clocked why. Like I couldn't get my head around it. She wasn't struggling in her performance. She wasn't, top of the group, but she was, between 80 and 110% consistently. But whenever we tried to implement something new, she'd resist or challenge it. Whenever we tried to encourage her to try something herself or coach her on things, she was a little bit resistant to it, to the point where I felt like there was just something not right. And so we had a really nice conversation, which sounds weird, right? Like you'd think in that situation you'd have a difficult conversation. We had a really nice conversation where I just asked her how she was enjoying her job. Are you enjoying what you're doing? And as we kind of talked about what she enjoys and what she was enjoying and what she wasn't enjoying, it became clear that what I needed to tell her, that it was okay if she didn't enjoy the job. If she wasn't enjoying it, she wasn't going to get fired. And I said, look, if you're not enjoying this, I need to know so that I can help you, not so that I can fire you. I'm not looking for this information so that I can get rid of you. I'm looking for it so that I can help you, whether that is find joy in what you're doing today or find joy somewhere else in doing something else. My role is to help you to be happy doing the things you're doing, because that's what drives the best performance in my team, but also that's who I am as a person. And we had a cry together as she kind of shared that she wasn't happy and she wasn't enjoying it, and she liked the business, she liked the team, but just didn't enjoy the work. And so we started talking about what other options might have been and what the future could look like, and from there. And so, yeah, I think just that human kindness of asking people about how they feel, right, beyond just what are you doing and why are you doing what you're doing, can be really powerful. I think the next one, and I could share hours and hours on this story, but the day that I got diagnosed with cancer, I had 2 or 3 meetings with customers scheduled. I had one in the morning that I went to, and I'd been taking painkillers because I wasn't feeling well, and managed to do a great job at. And I had 2 meetings scheduled that afternoon that I was kind of resistant, as my colleagues were encouraging me to call one more, speak to doctors and see what I could find out about what was going on. I was like, no, I've got customer meetings. I've got stuff I need to do. I've got this particular meeting. It was the end of November. We had a renewal at the beginning of January with a customer, one of our bigger customers. I was like, I need to have this call. Like, I need to have this today. Kevin, my co-founder and CEO, was just like, no, John, you don't. You need to find out what's going on. You need to get help. And obviously that makes it sound like it was a mental health problem, but it just, that focus on me as a person was indicative of who he is and how kind he is. But then he, made me call 111, which is the like non-emergency health service in the UK. He drove me to the hospital and stayed with me in A&E for hours as they did all sorts of tests. And it was only when I told him he had to leave, because they'd not diagnosed me with cancer yet, but diagnosed me with anemia. And I was like, there we go, we've got the answer, you can go home now, that he left. But still was, checking in with me, and my wife was one of the first people that I told once we got the full diagnosis. And, from there on in, I got visits in hospital, both expected and unexpected, from him and other members of the team. I got visits at home once I got out of hospital. And all of these things are things that, in hindsight, it would be insane for me to choose to spend this core part of my career with people that aren't that kind, but were consistently surprising to me, that I didn't expect. It wasn't what I expected from people. And so maybe that made it more special, but just that kindness of treating me like a human, and not just somebody that they work with, but somebody who is important to them. And actually, I had to beg for things to do to kind of get back into work rather than having things thrust upon me for a long time. And so, yeah, there's a longer story there, but that was definitely an important one that that's really helped me kind of set the tone for who I want to continue to be and become for the rest of my life and career.
Thank you so much for sharing both those stories. I think there's some very key messages in both. In the first one, that you need to be true to yourself, and throughout your journey and your professional careers, you need to understand what you enjoy and what you don't, because the more you do what you enjoy, the more you're going to thrive, the more work you're going to put into it, and the better results you're going to get. And someone that was already a good performer could have been an amazing performer on top of that if she was doing something she was passionate about, right?
Absolutely.
I think on your second story, there's two elements to it. The first one is the kindness of your team, of your co-founders, of the people that you surround yourself with on a day-to-day basis, which obviously were there for you, which makes me very happy. The other side, there's the element that I think is even less spoken about in sales, which is the kindness to yourself, right? And like the importance of asking yourself those questions and taking action, because salespeople are very good at taking action when it comes to other things and moving the needle for closing deals or helping people, but not so much when it comes to helping themselves, right? And I guess this is a message for everyone to always take the time to look after yourself, check in with yourself, and if something's not right, to acknowledge it. Because if you're not well, then you can't work. And in this particular case, the customer meetings were second priority, right? And I think that was potentially a very important lesson for you in your journey as well, right, John? Of what's actually really important when things do matter.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'd been working on in the run up to that was that I had a tendency to just say, I can do that. I can do that to everything. It's not that I'm not able to do a lot of things, but you only have the capacity that you have, right? You can't create more time, and you definitely can't create more health if for whatever reason that's at risk. And I think that, it's interesting. I've not really thought about that, but that's way less of a problem for me since then. I definitely challenge more. Why am I doing this? Not to be difficult or to cause any friction, but can I delegate the things that aren't important for me to do? Can I manage that this task will be done by somebody that can do it quicker? And also, like, how do I make sure that I'm living in a way that's sustainable, right? How do I do that? And I think it'd be wrong for me not to plug coaching as something that helps with that. Having a coach that you can talk to, that you can kind of share your workload with, and highlight where you're struggling, is something that I found really useful. And I know people that work with us at MySalesCoach find that really useful, and I'm sure you've got plenty of experience of people you're working with to do that same thing. But yeah, having somebody, whether it's your manager, whether it's a coach, whether it's internal or external or independent, somebody that you can kind of talk to about those things is really, really powerful to kind of help you manage that workload.
Yeah, I fully agree, right? And having someone that feels like a safe space is extremely important, because sometimes we do have managers or bosses or people around us that we don't necessarily feel we can speak to, but it doesn't mean that you're limited by that. Look outside of it. There are people you can speak to. You can send a message on LinkedIn to someone that you've met before that caused a good impression, or someone that's been in your shoes, right? Because I think, and that's one of the keys to vulnerability. And we were speaking to Mattia Schapper about this last week. And, she's become very well known for her vulnerability. And different generations take that vulnerability differently. And the older you get, the more it's almost like they have a bias around it of it not being good and being a weakness. And the younger you go, the more it's actually welcome and seen as a normal thing that everyone may struggle with at some point or another. So it's good to share, to realize that we're not alone, right? So yeah, I think things are changing, right? And it takes people first leaders, it takes kind leaders, it takes leaders that genuinely care about the people around them to make those changes.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think those people first leaders don't necessarily need to have all the answers, but they need to be willing to find ways to get those answers, right? You don't need to know everything about everything to be a people first leader. In fact, I would say a people first leader deliberately doesn't know everything about everything, but they provide an environment and create an environment where people can get the help they need from the person that's best placed to give them that help. Because they care about each of those individuals, which means sometimes telling them difficult things, which means sometimes telling them good things, which means putting and creating that environment where they can get access to the things that are going to help them be happy and successful together. Because that's the thing. It's all right being happy. It's good to be happy regardless of how successful you are. But I think that true happiness comes from the success that you care about. And that's an important part of it as well, right? Aligning people's goals and hopes and dreams and all of those things together.
One of my big beliefs is that happier people perform better generally, because if you're doing something that you're enjoying, if you're surrounded by people that you enjoy working with, if you're inspired, if you're challenged, motivated, you're receiving feedback, you're encouraged to grow, but also allowed to make mistakes, because that's how we grow, that's how we test things out. That is an environment that allows people to find their own path and to be successful within that. Find that cultures where everything's regimented and everyone's doing the same thing and sending the same thing and doing the same thing, it becomes almost robotic. And that's where AI has more of a potential to take over. But that's something we'll discuss in the second half of the podcast. But I do think that actually the top performers are the people that are enjoying what they're doing and that have a real why of what they're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one more question for you in this kindness in business area of the podcast, which is, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone trying to lead their business with more heart and humanity?
So I think, I don't know if this is the best advice that I could give, but it's the one that I'm probably most passionate about in many ways, is that when you employ somebody, when they're in your team, when they're working for you, you don't own their career. You're the custodian of it. And a custodian is different to an owner in that a custodian is trying to make something last forever, whereas an owner is trying to get what they want out of it. If you own a banana, you want to eat that banana, right? Like, it's something you own, you've bought it for that purpose, and you want to eat it. If you're looking after a banana tree or a banana plant, you're trying to grow those bananas. You're trying to make sure the tree survives. You're trying to create longevity out of it. And so, when I was running EXP, I had people that left the business that I really wanted to leave at times. I had other people leave that I really didn't want to leave. I think believing and recognizing that I was a custodian of their careers, that I was there to look after them and to care for them and to help them to accelerate their career, changed the way I dealt with all aspects of that. So when people left that I probably wanted to leave, it was about helping them to do that. It's about helping them to realize why this was a good thing for them rather than a bad thing for them. And that didn't mean that there was nothing negative about it, but how I could help them see the opportunities they would have. And then for people that wanted to leave, it was, how do I reflect on, are they leaving better than they came? Am I going to create a nice environment for them to leave and walk away from, where it keeps the bridge unburned and, keeps the door open for future engagements? And I think it changes the way you look at everyone that you work with, right? That your job isn't to burn them out so that they leave crawling, but to help them to develop and accelerate so that they leave running, not running away, but running continuously towards success. And I think that helps you get the best out of them as well, right? It helps you get them to run at a consistent pace and to be as effective as they can in everything they do, rather than, that risk of burning out or, burning brightly and then fizzling out for a little while. So yeah, I think remembering that you're a custodian and that you're there to help people have longevity in what they do and success, rather than trying to just get the most you possibly can out of them.
I think you said it beautifully there. And when you mention custodian, I think of nurture, right? I think of nurturing, I think of allowing to that person, that tree, to continue growing, to continue expanding and giving fruits in the sense of results, right? When we're talking about sales, but at the same time just making sure that it's not a one-time thing, right? If you're giving it attention, if you're giving it care and love, you want it to be consistent year over year. And sometimes the problem with that is that when you make people grow and when you make people successful, then they move on to other things. They move on to other challenges, right? And other times you've got people that unfortunately don't want that for themselves. They're not looking for that growth. They want a stable job that's similar, where they're doing the same thing, and that's okay. But at least it allows them to realize that as well, right? And then you know as well that as long as you're nurturing everyone around you, then results will come.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So we're going to move on to the sales development and AI portion of the podcast. And the first question I have for you is, how has the role of sales development evolved in the last few years, and what changes do you see coming?
So it's a really great question. I think the biggest changes I've seen, and if I think back to like when I was an SDR, when I was on the phones all day, every day, I think there's kind of two trends. One, in general, call volume has dropped. Not in a good way, but it's dropped. I will hear people saying that like their call KPI for the week is 150. When I started, it was over 200 at least, right? Like that was the minimum, was 200 to 250. And we were always looking for ways to accelerate and increase automation around emails. We built using Salesforce a really rudimentary cadence tool. And we had the ability to send one mass email a day. Every time someone used it, like it was just a nightmare. Like something would go wrong, they'd have a mistake in it or whatever, and so it was like really not frowned upon to use it for it being mass email, but just people couldn't get it right. Whereas now people can send mass emails out all day every day, kind of ridiculously so, and then spend all of their thinking time on like, well, what am I going to do next, or how do I have the perfect call. And so I think people probably think more now than they used to. Like there's a lot more thought. Like the best SDRs are definitely thinking more about what they do and being far more deliberate. But yeah, and probably doing generally more activity, but not always the right activity. I think there's still a real problem with like people spending a lot of time on the wrong activity, or at least proportion of activity is weighted far stronger into things that are just not ideal and not optimal for success. I think the changes that I see coming is that gap between the best and the worst is going to get wider.
Oh, yeah.
I remember teams where, the worst performer was doing okay and the best performers were killing it. And you'd speak to a team that wasn't a great team. I'd meet an SDR team, either one of our customers or through the network or whatever, and you'd kind of hear a few things and you're like, oh, that's not ideal, but they'd still be doing quite well. They'd still be booking a fair number of meetings. I think the gap between the best and the worst is going to grow. The best will probably use less tools, not more tools. They'll be really intentional with the tools they use. And the worst will probably poorly use AI. They'll use as many tools as they can, looking for quick fixes and quick solutions to the problems, rather than hiring and enabling people to become the best at what they do. A lot of people will talk about AI is going to kill the SDR role. I don't for a second believe that's true. I think that SDRs will become way more elite and the value of a great SDR will go up. We've seen salaries of SDRs absolutely skyrocket, probably mostly through inflation more than anything else over the last 10 years. But I think the value of a great SDR will become even higher. I think we'll probably see people stay in SDR roles for longer because they'll become so good at doing it that it will become harder to promote them, but also they'll want to stay longer because they'll feel successful in a way that maybe they didn't before. I remember a time where people would get promoted having not been consistently hitting targets. And that's fine because they're different skills, right? You could become an AE because you're ready for that role having not been a killer SDR but been a good SDR. I think now it'll be more that people really feel like they can do far better, and that recognition that by being at the top of your game as an SDR might earn you more money and be better for your career than being a rubbish AE. And so I think we will see people stay longer in that role because they master it and become really, really good at doing it. Maybe in some respects, I don't think we'll ever get to the stage where people hire SDRs and AEs and that there's not that reversal of the junior senior part of the role. But I think we'll see much longer, people, rather than it being 18 months to 2 years at most, I think we'll see 3 to 5 years as an SDR before moving into an AE role and start to see a little more peering of SDRs and AEs. Appreciate I've shared a lot of thoughts there that aren't all connected, but those are the first things that come to my mind.
No, thank you for sharing. And I think, you've raised some points that haven't been raised before with this question. I think a lot of people are focused on the AI piece, but you've mentioned some elements like the SDR-AE relationship and that getting tighter. You've mentioned the SDR role becoming a longer role or most like standing role, or even a role that people don't see as an entry role, just a standalone role that people become good at and do for many years. And I was going to share a story. I used to coach a lady that is 57 years old, and she's been an SDR for over 20 years, absolutely loves it, became an SDR team leader later, and is now a customer success manager, account manager. But for the majority of her professional career was an SDR, really enjoyed it, and didn't want to do anything else because she enjoyed the hunt, she enjoyed the thrill of booking the meeting, she dealt with all of the inbound as well as outbound, and she was very happy doing so, earned potentially more money because it was consistent commission being earned. And once you know what you're doing, it's a lot easier to integrate new products, integrate new accounts. You've already got the understanding of what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely resonate with that. And that consistency, I think, is a really important one, right? Like we see so many, anybody that has recruited salespeople at all sees so many CVs of people that are just bouncing role to role. And the truth is, some of them might be really successful, right? They might be really good at what they do. Many of them are doing that because they either are struggling in a role and so it ends quicker than they hoped it would. They might jump, they might get pushed, who knows? Or they fear that that's around the corner, right? They see the writing on the wall before maybe even their boss has, and so they jump quicker. And they would do far better being a successful, consistent SDR than they would making those jumps. But I think it really is a specialization piece, right? Like I think the key part is that gulf between the best and the worst. And I think that applies to the organizations as well. I think a lot of organizations that are canning SDR teams are doing it because they don't really understand what makes a great SDR. And so they see it as, we can get them in, they can book us some meetings and then they can get promoted. And it just doesn't quite work like that every time. You need to really do it properly and think about it as a function rather than as an easy route to getting whichever of those things is more important to you, right? Pipeline or people. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely gonna happen. There's going to be far less organizations that have SDRs, but those that continue to have them will do it really right and really well. I think with the AI piece, I think I heard a really interesting perception from someone. One of the members of our board, a guy called Malcolm, is in his 70s, been around the block a long time, and he talked about the personal computer and how when computers were starting to be used commonly in business, there was this belief that it was going to mean that jobs would be lost, right? Like, we'll be able to be so much more efficient, using computers. It's going to mean all sorts of things we don't need anymore. And the truth is, computers have meant that there are so many more jobs created than there ever were before. I think AI is exactly the same, right? There are absolutely going to be people that will be fired because they're replacing their SDRs with AI. Those businesses probably shouldn't have had SDRs anyway, because they probably are going to market in the wrong way, right? They're trying to do an outbound motion for a business that really should be inbound triggered, and that investment wasn't the right thing to do. There'll be other businesses that have just got their whole model wrong, and they should have had SDRs, but actually they should have thought about their go-to-market strategy differently to how they did. And actually, it's part of a downward spiral in that business anyway. The best SDRs will use AI to flower up email language. They'll invest more in how they write prompts than how they write generally. They'll make sure their grammar's perfect. They'll make sure that they're researching the right information and filtering information far quicker. They will leverage it to prepare content to share and to accelerate their ability to create a brand for themselves, right? Like, it's all sorts of other things that will accelerate the best SDRs rather than kill off average to good SDRs. I think poor SDRs, they're already dead in the water, right? They've been dead in the water for the last 10 years, never mind the last 6 months.
Yeah, I agree. And, when you mention about how salespeople can use AI, I think that very much translates to how can you use it to enhance rather than replace, right? Because AI is really useful. And if you use it well, it can save you a lot of time. But it is about using it well rather than letting it do your job for you, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's not been trained to do that. But it will at some point, and I have seen a lot of AI SDRs being advertised. I've seen a lot of them that aren't great, but who knows what will happen, right? Because AI is changing and evolving really rapidly. And I agree that some of the worst SDRs out there will be easily replaced. Some of the requests that are coming in inbound could also be replaced.
Yeah.
But when it comes to high intent, when it comes to account-based sales development, when it comes to really targeting specific accounts for specific reasons, you're going to need a human to drive those relationships, especially because one of the things that we've seen is that sales cycles are getting longer. Deals are being pushed out. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so in order to keep on nurturing, in order to make sure that those opportunities do get to a resolution, to hopefully a close one, you need to be on top of them and keep managing it. And you don't want to be sending out the same mass email to 10 potential opportunities. You want to make sure that you're spending your time, that you're using AI to find the right information and to do your research. But then it is down to you as a human to make it good.
Absolutely.
Right, I've got one more question for you in this AI sales development piece, and that's, do you think AI can be trained to sell with kindness? What would that look like?
It's a good question. I definitely think it can be trained to sell with kindness. But in the same way that there are brands that have kindness, right? Like the truth is that what AI enables to happen is just more proactivity and slightly more, and I say slightly, maybe it's a lot more personalization for people that are already engaged or wanting to engage, or that might be likely to engage. I think the truth is, like, kindness is tone. Kindness that AI can use is consistency, and honesty. So can it? Yes. But I think the truth is that I get mocked at home for saying please and thank you to Alexa, right? Like, I get mocked. Why are you saying please? It can't hear you properly. Like, it misunderstands what you're asking it to do if you say please. Like, that easy, simple kindness thing. Like, you can train AI to do that back and to repeat back and to sound kind. But kindness is about what that person needs most in that moment. And so you'd need some really good data to make AI feel kind. But also, like, is it kind if I don't care about the AI? If I don't hold myself accountable to the computer, is anything it does kind to me, right? We all, like, that. I think that the greatest example of notifications that people don't respond to is the Duolingo ones, right? Like, everyone has Duolingo and they're trying to learn another language, and I know you speak multiple languages. I've done, like, I don't know, a bit of French on Duolingo, but then the notifications keep coming, and guess what? I don't feel bad. I feel bad if I don't text someone back. I don't care at all, no matter how creative they are. I just don't care if I ignore it. That doesn't mean that some of them can't make me change my behaviour. They can, but I don't care. So even though it can be kind, kindness is a two-way street. Like, it involves two people. Otherwise, kindness is just, it requires me as the it would require me as the buyer to be kind. So can AI be trained to sell with kindness? Yes, but it doesn't really matter if the buyer's not kind. Like, it doesn't make a difference if the buyer's not kind. And I actually think it can, if we take people out of the sales process, we've already done that in many ways. I don't have to speak to somebody if I want a McDonald's. I can just order it on the screen. That's fine. That's not unkind, but that works for that thing. What that doesn't do is make recommendations to me that are really the best thing for me. Arguably, McDonald's never is the best thing for me. And so that's where there is a gap. That's where you'll always need a person, because it's about that accountability to each other, and kindness. Accountability and kindness can't exist without each other in a way that drives the best outcome.
And one of the things I'm hearing from what you've said is that it needs that genuinity, if that's a word. Like, it needs to be genuine. Otherwise, it's not really that relevant. Like, yes, we can make it speak with kindness, but it's not making it kind in itself. So, yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot that we can do, but does it replace people in that element? Does it make it feel something? No. And so it's going to be hard to make it care.
Absolutely.
So that's a very good note to end this section on. We're going to end the podcast with a quick round fire. So I'm going to be asking you 3 quick questions to answer on the spot. The first one is one book, podcast, or resource that's helped you lead with more kindness.
What You Do Is Who You Are by Ben Horowitz. I can't remember how much he talks about kindness in there, but I think the key theme is consistency. And, you know, if you set up rules for yourself to become who you want to be, you've got to live those rules. So if you believe that people's time is important, you yourself if you're late, right? Like you commit to that course of action and you set consequences for that action. And so, you know, if you truly believe that kindness is important, you can't then not be kind. You can't break that belief system. And so it's really helped me to, I know I'm giving you a long answer to a quick fire round here, but it's helped me to implement frameworks that force me to be who I said I wanted to be, rather than be flexible in my morals as and when I want to.
Yeah, it's a great book in terms of accountability and consistency and just becoming and creating the life that you want and who you want to be based on your actions, right? A little bit of the existentialist notion from Sartre in there, but yeah, very good book. Next question is, do you have any kindness rituals that you practice daily, weekly, or monthly?
Good question. I think the big one, and look at whether it's meditation, whether it's prayer, whatever it is, morning and night, I think about things that I'm grateful for, think about people that I care about, and consider things I can do to care for them, right? You know, as you think about people that you care about, are worried about, are concerned about, ideas come of things you can do. And also, like, names come to your mind, right? Like, you might be thinking about your mother or your sister or your grandparents or whatever, but then the name will pop into your mind and it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to text that person today, I'm going to ring that person today and just make sure they're okay. So yeah, that's one I do morning and night.
So taking some time to reflect and be grateful. And the thing is about gratefulness is the more you look at what you have, the less you focus on what you don't have. And that in itself is very powerful, because we all have so much. We're privileged in a lot of different ways, right? So taking the time to be present and acknowledge that is really important. The last question is, if your leadership style had a theme song, what would it be?
That's a great question. And I should have thought about this more. I think that Everywhere by Fleetwood Mac is the one I'm going to go with. And that sounds very micromanagey. But I've always wanted people that I work with to believe that I know everything. Not because I need to be infallible, but because nothing shocks me, right? There's nothing they can say that shocks me, that surprises me, that scares me. You know, it doesn't mean I know the answer, but if you're doing something, I know about it. And that's okay. We can work on that. And yeah, the people I work with, I want to be with them. I want to be with them everywhere, because I'm there with them, right? I'm not leading if I'm not with you on the journey.
That answer, and it's all about supporting the people around you and not being there, as you said, from a micromanaging perspective, just being there because you care and because you want them to do well. And so in that, you've got their best interest at heart. So that's a very good question. So just to wrap up everything, who do you think I should speak to next? If you could name 2 people that would be great candidates for the podcast.
So I think my brother, Callum, Richardson would be great. He's not in sales anymore, and so I don't know how many of the SDR questions he'll have good answers to. But he's a head of HR and corporate ESG for a corporate finance business, and so I think would have some interesting perspectives on the kindness in business piece. And then the other person I will nominate is Duncan Davies, the CEO of Notify Technology. I think they provide health and safety software. And so, their mission is to make 1 billion people safer at work. So a very kind objective. And I think he'd be an interesting person to speak to as well.
I will reach out to both of them. Unfortunately, we don't have a question from the previous guest. So I'm going to ask you one myself. What is one piece of advice you have for someone that is going through a challenging time at the moment, whether it's personally or professionally, and they're not quite sure how to speak about it or reach out for help?
It's a really good question. So I think you asked for one piece of advice. I think the most powerful advice I received in my recent hard times is that you're the most important person in your care plan. So whatever help you need, there are people whose job it is to help you, whether that's medical staff and medical people, whether that's mental health support, both professional and charities, whether that's your employer, whether that's family. And I appreciate not everyone has family that is in a place that they can be helpful, but across all those areas, there are people whose job it is to help you. So flow through those options and find somebody you can talk to and tell, because waiting for it, not through any fault of anybody else's, but you won't get the help if you wait for it to arrive. You've got to ask for it. You've got to go and find it. And so be bold, ask for help, tell somebody what you're struggling with. And even if they're not the person that can help you, they can find someone that will. And so, I'm happy to make my LinkedIn DMs open, see if I can offer guidance or help and direction for anybody that is struggling with anything. Again, probably not the best person for many people, but I might know someone that is. And so, happy to help.
It's very kind of you, and I encourage anyone listening to take you up on the offer, and also to realize that whenever we run away from our problems, which we all do at some point, by the way, they only become bigger. And the moment you face them, even if they are challenging, which in most cases they are, that's why we were running in the first place, you do feel better about yourself for taking it on, for taking action, and for making a choice, right? Because at the end of the day, things don't disappear because you ignore it.
Absolutely.
Right, just the final everything. I don't know if I've said that right, but just to wrap up this podcast today, what would be your question for our next guest?
I think what is a time where they found it hard to be kind? What's a scenario where they found it really difficult to be kind? And if they still managed to, what helped them to stay kind? And if they didn't, what did they learn from not being kind in that moment? And what advice would they give to people if they found themselves or someone else in that situation?
Very good question, and it's similar to one of our fellow MySalesCoach coaches, Brian Mulry. So I think it's a very interesting one, and I look forward to hearing the answer in the next episode. So thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you coming on, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. And to anyone listening or watching this, thank you so much, and I hope that you have a lovely day.
Thank you.